Christopher Saunders, and this is the Connecticut Sports Talent Show, where we talk all things talent in Connecticut. And this is a special edition of the Connecticut boys basketball preview. Yesterday, I had the Norwalk head coach, Coach Garrett Hickey, first-year head coach. Now I have a little bit of a seasoned guy. He's been around the league, coached at Valley, and now he's at East Lyme. Has been there for now his 8th season. Jeff Bernardi. Jeff, it's great to be able to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me on, Chris. It's a pleasure.
It really is, man. And what you've done as far as in the game of basketball, and especially at Valley, is, we'll get into that, during our discussion. I kind of just want to go into now I know you said you played at Guilford, and kind of the game of basketball. How did the game find you?
From birth, really. My parents were telling me when I was in my crib, I had a basket and I was dunking on it. So basketball's been in my blood since birth. Pretty much all of our family home videos from when I was a child, I had a basketball in my hand. So the game and I just connected very early on, and it's been my passion my entire life. I've truly dedicated my life to the sport as a player through college, and now as a coach. So it's definitely the love of my life.
Have you taken what you were as a player, and I'm sure you'll tell me what you were. I'm sure you were a grinder, and obviously winning a couple state championships and doing what you did at Valley and then now at East Lyme. You
Sure.
have to be somewhat of a smart coach, and I know you are. Have you taken what you were as a player and implemented that into your coaching acumen? Sure.
I think just part of my persona. I'm very dedicated to the fundamentals. As a player, I would spend 5 hours a day in the summer, every day, dribbling up and down the street in between garbage cans, shooting 100 free throws every day, shooting 300 jump shots, 100 3-pointers, charting all of that. So I was really disciplined and dedicated to my craft as a player, and that's carried with me into my coaching. I was pretty successful as a high school player and had the opportunity to play at Hamilton College for 4 years. But my role at Hamilton was completely different from high school. In high school, I had the green light, could shoot as soon as I crossed half court. But in college, it was the opposite. It was get the ball to the right guys and just dig in and play defense. So my role was to be a defensive player. Mm-hmm. I knew that, and I embraced it. So I just really dialed in and focused on becoming the best defender that I could be and embracing that role. And I think those two aspects have stuck with me. I understand what it's like to be the go-to guy, and I understand what it's like to be the role player. And it's that work ethic that I developed as a high school kid that just continues to carry with me as I preach discipline, teamwork, and work ethic now as a coach to my players.
So it brings a whole new definition getting to college when it comes to the heat check.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There were no heat checks for me.
That's funny, man. But, and I did not know that you played at Hamilton, because I broadcast within the NESCAC. I've done plenty of games at Conn College, Trinity, Wesleyan, same thing. I've done some games up at Amherst too. Playing in the NESCAC, and again, I don't know if you've been following any of the sports within, but the men's soccer won the NCAA title for
Conn College.
Yeah. And Wesleyan was a game away. They lost in the semis of the NCAA for women's soccer.
I believe Conn beat Amherst in the championship.
Yes, they did on the men's side. You're right. Yeah. And the NESCAC is so competitive, and seeing the basketball games on both sides. Just talk to me. I mean, did you expect to be able to see that when you went there?
No, I did not anticipate that. I guess you could say I was a big fish in a small pond in Connecticut. So I did not anticipate Division III basketball being so good. I thought, I was a New Haven Register all-area player my senior year. I averaged 20 points a game, and I just thought naturally I was going to walk into Hamilton and I was going to be the leading scorer. But it was so far from the truth. The point guard that played over me for 3 years scored like 1,700 points in high school. So it was like legitimate players. I was fortunate enough to play with 2 All-Americans at Hamilton my senior year and my freshman year. And then some of the teams we played, like Amherst, had a 6'7" transfer from Brown.
Yep.
So, Division III basketball, especially in the NESCAC, is like one step away from being good enough to play in the Ivy League. And we used to scrimmage Colgate when I was at Hamilton, and we competed with them. So I did not anticipate that. In fact, I look at the NESCAC today, and I'm pretty confident that I would not be able to play in the NESCAC today. It has gotten so good, and these kids are so talented, and they are so big that it's you to be competitive in the NESCAC, you have to have some D1 guys that just happen to slip through the cracks or just develop late. So it is by far the best league in the country when it comes to Division III.
I've always believed it doesn't matter the Division 1, 2, or 3. If you can play, and same thing with high school too. It doesn't matter if you're from a small town or you're from an area where people may not know much about that particular spot, maybe the school. If you can play, people will find you. And I feel like prime example, like the NESCAC, they find players that fit their system, but they also, because let's not forget, it's not so much, it's Division III. So you're not getting a full ride because of sports. It's an academic school, a high academic school, and you have to be able to withstand both a highly competitive on the field, on the court, and then you also have to be doing very, very well in the classroom. There's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, definitely. Student athlete, and again, you're not getting a full scholarship, so you're going there. You're playing for the love of the game. So you get a different type of commitment. Division I is more of a business. Division III is purely that love of the game.
Now, talk to me about, as far as, because obviously you knew at some point that basketball was going to end as far as, as a player. When did it start to hit you that potentially coaching could be something that you wanted to dabble in and see, what, maybe I should try this?
So unfortunately for me, my senior year of college, I had a sports hernia. So I pretty much tore my groin muscle. So I played in one game my senior year. But I'm a firm believer that everything happens for a reason. So I was the captain of the team that year. Felt like I had a pretty good basketball IQ. So I stayed on as like a student assistant coach, almost like a grad assistant, if you will, as a senior. And coach gave me some responsibilities. Again, I was a defensive guy, so I kind of led some defensive drills and again, acted as an assistant coach. And that's really where my passion for being a player transitioned to coaching. And then the year after I graduated from Hamilton, I went to grad school, University of New Haven, and I started coaching a sixth grade travel team in Guilford during that time period. And I loved everything about it. The kids were great. I loved teaching the game of basketball. So I knew I wanted to be involved in the sport. You just have to be involved with it. And it was really like those 2 years where I knew I'm all in on coaching.
Would you say that, and it stinks that you had to go through that injury and miss your senior year, but at least you were able to stay with the team and be a part of it, even though you weren't on the court. And I'm sure that was killing you every single game, especially for all you gave in high school and then your 3+ years at Hamilton. But do you feel like going through that kind of, like you said, the grad assistant, going through that kind of sped up the process as far as your coaching acumen? Because I feel like if you started out with the travel team, not to say that you wouldn't have been successful with them, but going through it in college, you're able to go through the growing pains of, okay, this works, this doesn't. Oh, I should try this because I saw success with it.
Yeah, I definitely found myself seeing the game through a completely different lens. And I think that really helped me progress as a coach. Then having to execute drills, having to explain drills, break down drills. Again, as a player, you just kind of do what your coach says and you just do it. You don't really think about why you're doing it. But as a coach, you have to design drills and with an understanding of what you're trying to accomplish with it. And that's the mentality I kind of developed at 22 years old and really helped facilitate and expedite my coaching experience.
So how did the high school game, how did that find you?
Coaching at the high school level?
Coaching, correct. And coaching, correct.
so I was really successful with that sixth grade team. I loved doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So Guilford had a new high school coach, Jim Reynolds from Cross, who I knew from my playing days. So he reached out to me. He knew I was involved in the community from Guilford. So he reached out to me to be the team's freshman coach that following year. So I took advantage of that opportunity. Of course, I'm going to coach with Jim Reynolds. He's a legend. He's a Connecticut Hall of Fame coach. So I was gladly accepted that position.
Mm-hmm.
And then the year after, I got my teaching job at Valley, and they had an opening on the freshman as the freshman coach there. So I took that position, and then pretty much from that year on, started working with Kevin Woods. And so I was at Valley for 5 years, and in those 5 years, played in 3 state championships, won 2, and then the position opened at East Lyme. I always knew I wanted to be a head coach, so I jumped on that opportunity. Was very fortunate enough to be hired by Steve Hargis, the athletic director, and I've had a wonderful experience over the last 8 years at East Lyme.
How was it being on the staff with Valley and Kevin? Because I follow him on Twitter, and he just seeing some of the stuff where as far as when he talks about the game, and he's a full sports guy, so we could talk we can talk about whatever. But knowing knowing how they played and still play to this day, and then knowing the football side too. And I know Coach King is no longer there, but just because obviously they would play against Ansonia. I'm from the NVL, so I used to see them a lot in the state championship finals in Class S. And seeing how much the attention to detail, the passion, just all of that, I can go on and on.
Yeah.
Did that kind of trickle to the basketball program as well?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Kevin also worked as the offensive coordinator with Tim King. So you could Kevin would have nothing but rave reviews about Coach King and the influence that he's had on Kevin with his coaching. And I could say the same thing. Even though Tim was a football coach, coaches know how to coach regardless of the sport. So he's somebody that I would have lengthy conversations with about coaching and connecting with kids and so on and so forth. So he was a wonderful resource for both of us. And then just being able to work with Kevin was so seamless. We both saw the game in a very similar light. I think we both have similar personalities. We take pride in our defense. We teach work ethic and the fundamentals. And like I said, it was just like a natural marriage working with him for 5 years. It was really easy. We worked together very well. We both had separate responsibilities and embraced that and allowed the teams to come together. And because of that, we had tremendous success over those 5 years.
How difficult was it though? Because I know it must have, it's never easy to leave somewhere where you have not, the amount of success that you had, but also too, because I felt like, and I'm sure you would agree that you kind of really built a strong foundation with Kevin at Valley, but then the opportunity with East Lyme came up. I mean, how hard was it for you to say, it's time for me to take the next step in my journey to become a head coach?
Yeah. After my 4th year, I started applying for head coaching jobs. I didn't get any after the 4th year, but then the 5th year, the East Lyme job opened, and again, I was fortunate enough to get that position. But so I would say I always knew I wanted to be a head coach, and it was a wonderful experience for the 5 years at Valley, being an assistant and still learning and grinding. I was so young. I think I started coaching there at 24. I was hired at East Lyme at 29. So I got my first head coaching job at 29. So, I'm still figuring out things today at 36. Even though it's my 8th year, I still have so much to learn and teach. But I always knew I wanted to be a head coach. It was just a matter of when the right opportunity presented itself. And I found that in East Lyme. So I was really in no rush to leave Valley, but I always knew that I wanted to be a head coach.
There was an interesting quote because I read the article of when you were hired by East Lyme, and it was a very well-written article. And I thought the athletic director at the time, and I think he's still there, Steve Hargis, is he still there?
At East Lyme, correct, yes.
Okay, because I thought this quote, especially because I knew you were a young guy, but I didn't realize you were that young when you were hired, and that's really cool.
Yeah.
He said that, and he was talking about you. He is extremely knowledgeable about basketball X's and O's, but equally important is he's a teacher that will support our academic-based athletic programs. I thought that spoke because it wasn't so much he talked about the game of basketball and that was it. He brought in the teaching aspect, teaching not just the on court, but also off the court. And I think that is huge when it comes to a head coach, but also a coach of young men and women as well.
Yeah, definitely. The basketball court is just an extension of my classroom. So I've actually found that being a basketball coach has helped me become a better social studies teacher because I understand the connection I can make with my players and the breakdown drills that we do. So I kind of do the same thing as a teacher with, teaching how to write. Break it down into steps before you worry about the whole process. So it's funny how there is a strong correlation between coaching and teaching. And yeah, absolutely. Like fundamentals, teaching the basics. And that's, when you have a strong foundation and the building blocks are set, your potential is through the roof.
Now I know
always preached.
Exactly. And, coach, your first season, it must've been tough. You guys went 1-19 and
1-19. Yeah.
And I'm not trying to bring back bad memories, but there's a reason why I mentioned that is because after that point, you finished either at 500 or actually better than 500 in 5 of the next 6 seasons. And you only had one losing season during that time. And do you feel like, just take me into that, the 1-19 season, how, and again, I'm not going to ask like the Buffalo Bills reporter who asked, hey, are you embarrassed that you guys lost because the team only threw the ball 3 times? I'm not going to ask that. But what I'm going to ask you is, how was it going through that season for someone like yourself who had so much success at Valley, and then your first season is it's difficult? How was that?
Very difficult. It was eye-opening for me as a coach because there was a lot that I took for granted coaching at Valley because we had amazing talent. In the 5 years I coached at Valley, I think 6 or 7 of those kids went on to play college basketball. So there were things that we just did that we didn't necessarily have to teach and break down. The kids just did it because they had been playing basketball their whole lives. And they were really talented and good enough to play at the college level. So when I went to East Lyme, there were things I had to teach that I didn't have to teach at Valley. So when we started the year out, I had, expectations. We're state tournament. We're going to get 8 wins. We're going to qualify for state tournament. We're going to qualify for the ECC tournament. And then we started the year 0-5. And immediately I was like, you know what? Winning is not important this year. That is not a priority for me. First and foremost, I need to become a better coach. I need to get more experience with my instruction, so on and so forth. That needs to improve. But second, I need to teach fundamentals. I need to teach how to play the game. And first and foremost, I need to teach about dedication, work ethic, and striving to reach goals. So I threw out the record. I didn't care about wins and losses. It was about trusting in the system, becoming better over a length of time. And that's what we preached. And the kids really, really bought into that. They themselves weren't worried about winning and losing. Their focus was on becoming better basketball players. And immediately that second year, I saw that pay off. We won 13 games. We went from 1-19 to going 13-11. And we won our first game in the ECC tournament. And we won our first game in the state tournament. And I think, that perspective on what was important at that time allowed for building blocks to be established. And this program has really grown from there.
In the ECC,
so I really consider that year 1-19, that was a successful year because it allowed me to teach. It allowed me to learn pretty much as I went. But also at the same time, it allowed a foundation to be established. And the program has really taken off from then.
And the ECC coach is not something where, and I think almost every conference, I think any coach would say this, but just looking at the ECC, I mean, you have the likes of NFA, you have
Sure.
Fish, you have New London. I mean, can go on and on and on. I mean, you actually have three teams in Division Three, which East Lyme is in, of which are part of the ECC.
Yeah.
And I just, I think if you're able to have a successful season there, like you said, you won your first game in the ECC, you won a playoff game. I think it prepares you for the state tournament because of all of the teams.
Yep.
And like you said, going 1-19, although the record is not good, like you said, it was a success for multiple reasons, and it kind of jump started the program to where it is
Yep.
now.
Yeah, definitely. I was that first year, the priority became about establishing a culture.
Mm-hmm.
And if that was the only thing we accomplished that year, success. And I really feel we did that. We accomplished that.
Has there been any players from that, your first year with East Lyme that ever, I'm sure you talked to many of your players after they
Yeah.
graduate. Have any of
Yep.
them come back either that year or in previous years and said, Coach, like, what you did with us, taught us, coached us, like, we appreciate it and all of that? Anything like that?
Yeah, I have actually. When we were playing in the state quarterfinals, I want to say, or maybe it was even like the ECC championship game. A couple of those kids reached out to me, and they
Mm-hmm.
were like, "Thank you for what you've done for this program. You've brought this program back from the depths, and thank you for doing that and getting pride back from the community." So that really meant a lot to me, because even those kids weren't playing in that game, they still felt a part of it. And
Mm-hmm.
those kids, I hope, feel a little bit of responsibility for the success that these kids have today with basketball at East Lyme, because again, they were responsible for laying that foundation and instilling that culture.
And speaking of the community aspect too, because I always like to ask coaches this as well. The community itself, it's a huge plus if you can have that, because then you not only get the support of fans and parents and relatives and all that at games, but also too when you're trying to continue to move the pipeline, or if you're trying to expand to summer league teams or youth teams, like you said, when you were coaching when you first started after Hamilton and such with the sixth grade team.
Yeah.
um, how was that when you first started with East Lyme as far as within the community?
So I think the travel programs started to expand maybe a couple years before I got there.
Okay.
So the youth program really invested in their travel program. So not only do they play in the Shoreline, but they also would play, I believe, in the Mashantucket League, and that would be against bigger schools as well. So the competition they played was stronger, and they
Mhm.
played 40 to 50 games, and you can see that today with the kids when they come to high school, they are ready and they are more prepared. So it's been a great partnership with the rec league, mainly the travel organizations.
Mhm.
So I talk to the coaches. I've had meetings with the coaches. I run a clinic in the fall for the players. I've done some coaching clinics. Would like to get back to that once this COVID passes. But it's definitely a partnership. We all take responsibility in the success of the high school program, and it's so great to be able to have that feeder system.
Coach, it's great to be able to have you on. I kind of want to dive into the program itself, and obviously this season. Hopefully we can have a normal season. I know
Yeah,
this new variant, Omicron, depending on what you hear about, you hear different things. Hopefully it's going to push away and we can have some normalcy again, kind of like
yeah,
what we had in the summer, where things were looking to be heading up. As
yes,
far as positive for everybody, and not positive cases, but positive for ourselves to get back to normal.
yeah.
What kind of team, because I know some games were played last year, and there was a quote that you said too after the Ledger game where you said this might be the best defensive team I've had at East Lyme. And
Yeah,
knowing how much you care about defense, you don't throw that out just for any, like, just talk to me about that. And is there any remnants of that for this year's team as far as from the past of last year?
sure. Yeah. Uh, I had a feeling that last year's team was going to be good. Um, the year before that was the other year we didn't qualify for states. We went 6-14. but the JV team was undefeated. And we had a really tough schedule. Our second game of the year, we played Notre Dame of West Haven, and our JVs beat them. And then, they beat other teams. They beat NFA twice. They beat Glastonbury. So we had a really challenging schedule, and they did very well. So I was hopeful that would translate to the varsity level. And those kids were they were good athletes, but they really dug in on defense. We didn't score a ton of points last year, but we pretty much shut teams out. And we knew that if we were going to be successful, we weren't going to outscore teams. We were going to have to limit how many points they had. So there were numerous games. We played 10 regular season games. Maybe half of those games, we held teams to under 40, 45 points. So I was really impressed with the commitment that these kids put forward on their defense. And it's something I preach, but it's really on the player. They have to buy in, and they're the ones exuding that energy and making that commitment. And that's exactly what they did. So there are definitely some of those players from that team that are still on the team this year. So Will Anglin is a specific example. He will spearhead our defense this year. And then we have Rowan Mundell. He'll be my bulldog point guard. A guy, he's not going to score a lot of points. He's going to handle the ball. He's going to facilitate, but he knows and he takes pride that the defense starts with him. He's the head of our defense. So with those two guys up top, I'm hoping that we can replicate some of our success on the defensive end last year.
Do you have a roster as far as this season is concerned, Coach, where focusing on defense, and it sounds like you want physicality, you probably want speed as well. Do you have more guards than you do center forwards? Do you have hybrids where you have a forward that can play the guard position if you need? I mean, do you have anything like that amongst your roster?
So I was talking to my assistants yesterday and today about this. This may be one of my deeper teams this upcoming year. I don't know if we have the superstar. I don't know if we have the first team all conference player, but we have a strong team, and I'll take a strong team over the individual. So in some areas we go 3 deep, and tomorrow we have our first scrimmage. And I told these guys today, hey, I'm looking to play 12 kids in the scrimmage, significant minutes. So, that will really be our first test, but I have good size. I have those wings, those hybrids, and then I have the guard play to help in all facets. So I feel like we have every position covered. I feel like I have 2 players at each position, some even 3. And we have a great balance of upperclassmen and underclassmen who are going to be able to work together. So if those underclassmen players can play at the varsity level, I think we're going to be pretty good this year.
I've always believed that the teams that are, and I think if you have a couple superstars, it's good, but it's easier, in my opinion, to shut down, especially if 1 or 2 of the superstars is having a bad day shooting or gets into foul trouble. It's a lot easier to defend that or go against that, game plan against that, than it is to game plan against 12, 13, 14. Like you said, you're 3 deep at almost every position, it sounds like. I feel like that is so much more difficult to plan against. And if you have the capability of having and trusting, it's almost like a couple years ago, I don't know if you're familiar with the NVL, but there's a coach up at Torrington, Eric Gamari, who does a fantastic job. And whatever he has amongst his team, he works with it. If he's got superstars, he goes with it. If he's got a team where he needs to go, there were times when I was doing their games, it was like a hockey style, 5 in, 5 out, 5 in. He would never do 1. He would always do 5. And I feel like he was not only keeping the players engaged, but he also was at the same time utilizing the talent that he had to the, nth degree. You know what I mean?
Definitely. Yeah. The team, the way I coach this team and last year's team is completely different than the way I coached Dev Ostrowski and Luke Leonard. Dev Ostrowski is the best player in East Lyme High School. He was the Connecticut Player of the Year in 2019. Averaged 31 points a game his senior year. So the offenses we ran then were to get Dev shots and to get him in space. And then, he had his wingman and Luke Leonard, who was also 1,000-point scorer. So I had 3,000 points between two players. That's not the case this year. But again, it's that balance. You're not going to be able to key on one guy because we'll just run something else and look at other options. Mm-hmm. So my hope is that I have 4 or 5 players on the court who are offensive threats. And again, that's going to be tough to game plan against, because if you look to shut down one guy, we'll just counter that with a different type of action and look to attack and execute from another angle.
Coach, it's been awesome to be able to have you on, and I could talk about East Lyme, forever. I remember when I was at my previous employer during the summer, I actually sent you a tweet and I was like, hey, I just drove by East Lyme School and the field looks really nice as far as the football field. I can only imagine what the court looks like. And you told me it's pretty nice. It's pretty nice.
It's very nice. Yeah, it's got that UConn model to it where the inside the 3-point line is a little darker than the rest of the court. Mm-hmm. So it's a really nice court. It's a great gym to play in.
Hopefully you can come up to the NVL so I can see you. Or if you play an NVL school in the CIAC tournament, maybe I'll see you around there as well.
Yeah, we're playing Platt in their Christmas tournaments. That's pretty close. Meriden pretty close to
that's pretty close
NVL territory.
Yeah, it's pretty close. Maybe if I'm not, if I can stop by, maybe I'll check out the game, because Platt, Coach Moncrief does a fantastic job with that team, and I think he's got a couple players as well. One of them, in particular, he just loves the growth that he's had from last year to this year, and I think that's going to be very fun to see. A CC, I love seeing teams go out of conference. So seeing the ECC and the CCC go up against each other, it's always a good brand of basketball.
Yeah, Platt. I think Platt's loaded this year. They have a great roster. I think a lot of teams are going to be sleeping on Platt, and pretty soon they're going to find out that team's for real. And I would not be surprised if Platt challenges, the Windsors and the East Catholics this year. I think they're that good.
I think the CCC may be one of the best conferences for basketball, because you have East Catholic, you have Northwest Catholic, don't forget, you've got Donovan Klingen at Central. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. You've got teams that are on that second tier in the CCC that would be first tier in a lot of other conferences.
Yeah, I think you're going to find that across the state this year. I think it's safe to say Connecticut basketball has been down the last 2 years. Mm-hmm. But what I've seen through the summer and the fall, Connecticut basketball is back. It is really good this year. I feel, my team at East Lyme, we have the opportunity to be better than last year's team. But having said that, NFA's better, Fitch is better, New London's better, Waterford's better, Ledyard's better. Mm-hmm. And from what I've heard, that's the same for the SCC. It's the same for the CCC. The FCAC is looking to have a really strong year. So I think in general, Connecticut basketball has really improved over the last year.
What have you heard about the NVL? I'm just curious.
I have not heard much about the NVL. I'm sure Holy Cross is loaded.
Naugatuck is not going to be. They got Anik Poma back. They still have Avery Hinnett. They still got the two-headed monster, but they lost a lot of pieces between the loss of the state championship in the 2019-2020 season. Then they graduated one of their best players in Robert Sanders last year. So, but I don't know if you're familiar with Coach Wilson, but he's another guy. Lives and breathes, was a great player at Naugatuck, played at Rider. He's one of those guys, like I talked about with Gamari. He squeezes as much out of that tube, but he also is when it comes to the players, man, he gets as much as they can, but he puts everything on the line. You can't question his heart.
Yeah, we actually played them in a Christmas tournament up in New Britain in 2020. It would have been 2018, 2019, when Avery was a freshman. So they had the lefty all-state player. I forget his name at this point, but he was their best player. He was really good. Mm-hmm. And that was a dogfight for us. I think we wound up winning by like 16, but that was a tough game. They were very aggressive, very physical, fast. Mm-hmm. I remember that.
Yeah, they're called the Hounds for a reason. They fight and they're aggressive.
Yeah.
But Jeff, it was
when I was in Valley, we had some battles with St. Paul.
Oh, really?
Like every year in like the quarterfinals or the semifinals, we always played St. Paul.
Really? Oh, so you battled with Coach Phelps? the legend
Yeah.
Phelps. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. We beat him at the buzzer. My very first year at Valley. We beat him at the
Mhm.
we were losing the whole game except for those final 0.6 seconds. Mitchell King hit a shot as time expired.
Yeah, Phelps is again. And maybe I sound like a homer because I just know these guys because I've been around them. But Phelps has been around the game for so long, and it's like he's seen every. I mean, he's a guy that he just knows the game of basketball. And
Yeah.
anytime anybody who goes up against him, it's always going to be a battle.
Yeah.
You know.
I can agree with that.
But Jeff, again, it was awesome to be able to have you on here. I could talk to you forever. Stay in touch,
Sure.
keep me in the loop on East Lyme because I'd love to hear how you guys are doing throughout the course of the season.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much, Chris.
Awesome. That'll wrap things up here in the Connecticut Sports Talent Show. So until next time, stay safe. Our CT stands for Connecticut Talent. And I'm out journey to find them all. Enjoy the rest of your day, everybody, and be well.